A note to our listeners, this episode contains discussions of child abuse and rape. Ashley has always had terrible eyesight. One day in high school, her glasses broke, and for whatever reason, her mom wouldn't replace them.
And they presented me with a pair of glasses that I could wear. And I was like, oh, I have my sight back. Like, this is a massive deal. And I go home and I tell my mom, and she is so mad at me. She is so mad at me that these people felt like they needed to do something that was her job, and she would say things to me like, I'm your mother. And it was this sort of resentment of me receiving help that she didn't give me, while also at times being completely unwilling to help me and putting me in the position of constantly feeling like a burden.
Welcome to In This Family, presented by Nexus Family Healing. I'm Dr. Michelle K. Murray, President and CEO. Ashley C. Ford has written for the New York Times, Slate, and The Guardian. She's hosted several podcasts for BuzzFeed and HBO, and she's the author of the critically acclaimed New York Times bestselling memoir, Somebody's Daughter. Ashley grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, received a lot of care from her grandmother, and had a difficult life with her mom. A lot of neglect, a lot of physical, emotional, and verbal abuse. Ashley's father was not around. He was incarcerated for 2 rapes, sent to prison when Ashley was a baby, not released until Ashley was in her 30s. Through hard work and with extensive therapy, Ashley came to understand what she had experienced as a child, what she had been denied, and how to approach the future. That meant getting to know her father when he got out. It meant accepting her mom for who she was, not who Ashley or society might have wished she would have been. And it meant Ashley moving in to new, healthy relationships. Ashley C. Ford lives in Indianapolis with her husband, writer and poet Kelly Stacy, and I spoke to her from her home. Welcome, Ashley Ford, to In This Family.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's set the scene here. Tell me about the role your mother played in your life, your father, and your grandmother.
My mother was my obviously primary parent. If you read the book, you'll know that I am her first child. And the role that she played was, a matriarch in a sense, um, with very heavy on the authority part of that and the authority in that role. My father was a completely absent parent because he was incarcerated before I really have memories. And we were able to communicate eventually via letters and phone calls, but otherwise completely absent. And my grandmother, I would say, while I was never my grandmother's child in the sense that I lived with her full time for all of my childhood or anything like that. Like, that's not what happened. However, I think in a lot of ways, I do consider her my primary parent, probably the closest I had to a parent that felt like I was getting the kind of parenting I wanted or deserved.
Let me ask you this. Do you consider that you were abused by your mom?
I mean, yeah, it is complicated because I was definitely not raised to think of what my mom was doing as abuse, which most abuse victims would not be. I don't know anybody who was abused and that the person who was doing it the entire time was going, I'm abusing you. This is abuse. I'm abusing you. Like, that's not how it works. It's actually part of the function of abuse that it is normalized and that the truth about the egregiousness of it is obscured. it's been very interesting because I think I was really taught to think that as I got older, I would think of the things that happened to me less and less like abuse. And the opposite has happened. They've actually, as I've gotten older, it's become more and more clear that they were abuse and how they were abuse. My mom was neglectful. That was one way that she was abusive. I saw a dentist twice the entire time I lived in her household. I have issues with my feet and ankles and hips that I will have for the rest of my life because they were neglected and not taken care of when I was a child. Medically, I have quite a few issues that I will be working through and paying for the entire rest of my life because of childhood medical neglect. Emotional neglect. I was not allowed to have emotions that were not happiness and excitement in my mother's house, and even those had to be contained and very specifically presented. I had to have reasons why I was happy and why I was excited, and those reasons need to be reasons that she would approve of. Otherwise, it could become something that moved into physical violence, where, because it never stopped with just like name calling or accusations. There was also hitting, punching, kicking, and it was always justified, and there was absolutely never an apology for any of it, right or wrong. Reasonable or unreasonable, like none of that mattered. I don't think that there's a reasonable way to punch and kick your child. Um, but even if there were, uh, it didn't matter. It just the lack of agency and the lack of control that I had as like the function of being a child was very, very, very much weaponized and also sort of like put in my face, like you can't do anything about this.
Mhm.
And it sucked. It sucked. It was abuse.
So, one thing I loved in the book is you referred to these situations and these moments and experiences with your mom as the mother. And
Hmm.
it was really powerful for you to make that distinction. Can you just give us maybe one or two examples of experiences that you had that you were just describing with the abuse with the mother?
You know, the idea of the mother is something that I didn't recognize I had until I was writing the book, until I was in the process and sort of had to deal with the fact that I had these different versions of my mother in my head. I had the fantasy version who had never existed, I had the reality version, and then I had the version who I separated so that I could continue to try to feel safe with the reality version. The difference between what I would say was my mom and the mother was that my mom was actually like a really charming person. And so much of our personalities are similar. The mom liked to laugh. We did a lot of laughing. She liked to dance. She liked to watch us dance. She liked to take us places and let us run around and have fun and introduce us to people. And like there was so much fun in those like moments and in those pockets. And then the mother was this form of my mom that essentially treated us like a stranger. And I would call her the mother because I never, not in a million years, I call my mom mom. I would call her mama, but I would never say mother. You know what I mean? That was just a word that felt so separate from our relationship. And when my mom behaved that way, it felt separate from every other part of our relationship. And it felt like these huge setbacks because I knew that I wouldn't feel safe again until I kind of forgot about the existence of the mother or until there had been enough gap of time. And in that time, in that amount of time where I didn't feel safe, it was extra hard to be a kid and to be a person because when my mom hurt me, she reacted to it by like not wanting the evidence of my hurt. the evidence of my hurt was reason to get hurt again. So if I if in those weeks after I had an encounter with the mother, if I was more likely to flinch when she reached for me, if I would shut down because she would get angry and start asking questions that I didn't have answers to, and I didn't want to answer wrong because I didn't want to get in trouble, but I didn't want to not say anything because not saying anything would get me in trouble. And so everything in me would just freeze, but freezing will get me in trouble. So it was just an indicator that time was about to become so fraught for a little while, and I wouldn't be able to just go back to trying to feel normal or feel stable, and it sucked, so it could be anything, like the mother is the person who showed up when I was injured. If I got injured, if no matter what was going on before, if we were having fun, if we were just having a good time, I can remember when I came home after having broken my foot in the walking to the bus. I had on these little, you remember those really cute like platform loafers
Yes.
that we had. And I had a fun pair of those that I worn to middle school. And and because I have this issue with my feet and my ankles, when I was walking to the bus with them on and it was like snowy outside and kind of slushy, my foot slipped and my foot fractured.
Oh,
And I went
ouch.
home and I didn't know what to do because I immediately obviously felt the pain. I knew that something was wrong with my foot. I just continued to walk on it, on and off the bus, did not take my shoe, you know what I mean? Like everything's still on. And I remember having like some chocolate in my bag because we'd had a party in class and all this candy had gotten handed out, and just shoving the chocolate into my mouth to try to negate the pain that I was feeling, and then getting home and realizing that I was going to have to tell my mom because I could see like the bone sticking up under the skin, like I could see the fracture. And, it didn't go well because I ended up not having, my mom didn't believe me. And she felt like I had done something to my foot or that I was trying to do something to it. And I did not actually receive medical attention for that foot until it double fractured. It fractured again because it
Wow.
hadn't healed correctly.
You described the experience of dissociating, which is a feeling of being disconnected from your body or emotions. When did that start with you and why?
This is interesting because my husband and I were just having a conversation where I told him I don't think I remember a time before dissociating. Like a lot of defensive and protective tools that I think are developed during childhood, like it was my safe place to go. It was my, fantasy world. I just thought I had a good imagination. And isn't that amazing? Shout out to Reading Rainbow. Shout out to the Magic School Bus. Shout out to just like a childhood surrounded by some of the most amazing media intended for children that has ever, and I'm worried will ever exist. I'm having all of that happen, and imagination is really pushed, like there's a place that you can go in your mind when you're reading, when you're listening to music, when you're in the back of a car on a long car ride, places, things you can think about. And I would go to those places because it was a way to entertain myself, but it was also a way to keep myself safe by not reacting. The As a kid, I thought the safest thing you could be was invisible. The absolute safest thing you could be was invisible, because it felt like when my mom was angry, no matter who she was angry at or what she was angry about, she could find a reason to take it out on me. There was something I would do. She would tell me things like, I know you're lying because I know when you move your hands that way that you're lying. And I would think, oh my gosh, is this what people who lie do with their hands? I didn't know that. Am I lying? Maybe I am lying and I don't know I'm lying, right? And so the nervousness and the anxiety that would be coursing through me. I might cry, which could get me in trouble. I might slightly raise my voice, which could get me in trouble because of the anxiety. I might move too quickly or too slowly. So it was just easier to not be there at all. And so that whatever happened to my body, I didn't have to experience in real time. I was trying to put a delay on it. I was trying to find some distance between who I am and the experience that my body is having, because my body was having so many experiences and dealing with so many things that felt like they were so separate from my choices and my desires and what nobody cared. It didn't matter what my choice was, what my desire was, the way I felt. None of that mattered. It only mattered to me. So I'm going to take myself and go somewhere else. And you can have that stupid body that apparently does all the things that make you mad and that make you want to hurt. Have it. I'm going to go have me somewhere else.
Yeah, I just really appreciate you describing that because it's hard for people to understand the dissociation. And it's
Yeah.
so common among people who are enduring abuse. It is a way of protecting oneself. And it's a powerful way to protect oneself. And it's resilience. It really is a way for someone who has absolutely no
Mhm.
control over what's happening to endure and to find a way to protect themselves. So I appreciate you describing that. And you mentioned that it still kind of shows up now. Does
Yeah.
it ever show up in your relationship with your husband, and how? And then how do you guys deal with that?
Oh man, yeah. You know, my husband, I always say he's my safest place outside myself, right? Like he has we have both worked hard and he has worked so hard to become the that safe place for me outside of myself. And you know, so much of our relationship has been about choosing each other, um, wanting each other and choosing each other over and over and over when there's definitely an out, right? When there's like a, you could take that exit ramp, and every time we see the exit ramp and look at each other and are like, oh no, we're going to keep doing this. Like, this might be a tough point. You might be having a hard time, or I might be having a hard time, or, something in the world might be going on. But if taking the exit ramp is exiting from you, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in not being with you. It's just not what I want. And the thing that comes up for us a lot is the difference in how we were raised and our backgrounds. My husband comes from an extremely healthy, extremely loving, like family, and not in like the weird codependent way where then they don't like outsiders and try to like keep it, but in the like welcoming, actually warm and loving way that I thought maybe only existed on in television shows. And he actually had that, right? Has that. And so I think the disassociation thing comes up specifically in the place that I have disassociated so much from my desires, because of both growing up in poverty, growing up in an abusive situation, and also growing up in a way where my desires were often used like against me. Wanting something was an easy way to end up being controlled, or owing somebody something that you didn't agree to and that you didn't realize you would owe by receiving the thing that you wanted. So it was like safer to not want things and to disassociate from desire, like period, especially about any sort of like things. And it wasn't until I was with my husband that I realized I had done the devaluing of my own desires so much. I had taken on so much of that work in order to prevent being controlled that I was completely separated from it. And whereas I thought I was really chill and just was sort of like a, yeah, I could do this or I could do that kind of girl, the truth was that I was scared to have preferences, extremely scared to have preferences. And I felt like having preferences was sort of like a setup to just be eventually disappointed, either because you couldn't afford the thing, or like the thing, maybe the formula changed for the thing, or the thing gets damaged, or whatever it is, there's always a way to get disappointed. And so it was easier to just not want. And then I realized that how much that was holding me back. My husband and I, right after he proposed, took a trip to Italy, and we got to Italy, and we were going to hit four cities, and he had done a whole itinerary, and there were all these things to do. And he started going, well, we did this and we did this. What do you want to do? And every time he said, what do you want to do? I was like, and he would go, okay, all right, well, I was thinking we could do this. And I would be like, yeah, let's do this. And then we would go to the next thing. And he would go, okay, well, we did that. What do you want to do? I, and it wasn't until we were on the third city that we were sitting in a hotel room and I was crying and telling him that I only ever allowed myself to want to come here. It felt too dangerous to allow myself to think about specific things I wanted to do or specific places I wanted to see because that felt like wanting too much. And anytime we tried to talk about what did I specifically want to do there, everything in me would shut down, just completely shut, just blank. I was just like, I don't know, whatever, because I was not connected, purposefully disconnected from the part of me that would have had a preference. I had only ever thought one day I'm going to go to Italy and I'm going to stop at a shop and get a cone of gelato. And I want it to be pistachio, right? All I wanted was a cone of pistachio gelato and to be in Italy. And that was as big as I could allow myself to dream. That was as big as my capacity to dream because anything else felt like it might lead to the kind of disappointment that just like shattered me, and that there are levels of happiness or joy or excitement that I would never be able to reach again.
Well, you definitely learned at a very early age that it just wasn't safe for you to have a preference or
Yeah,
needs or wants or desires. I mean,
yeah,
in addition to the poverty, that's a very real thing that has an effect and can
yeah,
certainly have an effect on your mom's stress level as well, clearly.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So is there something that you are doing to try to push past that you have found successful?
I I have to spend a lot of time thinking about what I want and
Yeah,
letting myself have the time, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Because one of the things that my husband has said to me is, because I was like, it's so easy for you. If I say, Kelly, do you want to see this movie or this movie? You're like, I want to see that one. Even if you hadn't heard of both movies and hadn't done a bunch of research and like one of them wasn't a movie you had been dying to see. It's like just like you can have a choice put in front of you and you can make a choice feeling confident that the choice you made is the one you will enjoy or like more.
yeah,
I don't have that. All most of my life up until like now, the last decade and not even then has been about like the world, my family and my community sort of training me to be grateful for things that I didn't want,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Because when you come from nothing in terms of material, there there's the actual thing that's happening where you're not getting like the toy you wanted for Christmas or the clothes you wanted for a new school year and things like that. Those things happen. But people don't talk about the fact that you not only don't get the toy you wanted for Christmas, you might get something that like you never would have played with if it was at somebody else's house. If it was like your cousin's toy, it's not the one you would have picked out of their toy box to play with when you're over there. And it has nothing to do with your interests. It has nothing to do with anything you like or want. And you have to perform excited gratitude for whoever gave you that thing as a child. And you have to figure out how to perform for things you don't like and things you don't want. You have to learn how to like sort of how to cater to the adult ego in that way. And it's presented to you as being a person who's grateful, being a person who has gratitude, being a person who understands that a person didn't have to give you anything. But it doesn't acknowledge that you are a whole, full person who was just given a gift that is supposed to be for you. And the gift is thoughtless.
Yeah.
It's generic toy for child, not this thing for Ashley, this thing for Kelly, this thing for John,
Yeah.
and you are supposed to not only ignore that gap that you can feel, you are supposed to perform the opposite to cater to the adult ego in that moment. And I'm thinking about what that does to you as you get older because what it taught me was that like it's better to live without preferences.
Yeah. Wow. That's a big cycle to try to overcome. Well, your grandmother seemed to be a very safe person for you.
Yes.
So, can you describe your relationship with her?
Yeah, and I want to say, yes, grandma, very safe person for me. Not not an incredibly kind person. Well, not a soft person, I guess is maybe the better way to put it. She was just more likely to treat me like a person. Um, which is not to say that she was perfect and that, there weren't things that she did or said that were crossing lines or out of line or just like not appropriate for a kid to hear or a kid to do. Shouldn't have taken me to go see What's Love Got to Do with It in theaters when I was 6. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Weird choice.
Yeah.
But if I think back to my entire childhood and I think about an adult who I was able to sit on their lap and get kissed on my cheeks and my forehead, or they touched my face lovingly, or they held me lovingly, all of those memories are of my grandma.
All right. Well, let's shift to your dad for a minute. So,
Mm.
describe your relationship with your father.
So when I was growing up, my relationship with my dad existed entirely in the few letters that he sent me during the year. And any snippets of information or photos that I could get a peek at somebody else's house, like that was really all of my relationship with my dad. Because my mother did not really speak to him um, because he was in prison and he had been in prison since he got arrested, I think, when I was about 6 months old and then went to prison within months of that. A few phone calls, all of that. But I sort of desperately thought of my dad a lot, a
Mhm.
lot, a lot, a lot, because the letters he sent me were so nice.
And how
Yeah.
often did he send you letters?
He would send me at least one every birthday, but then he would send somewhere between 3 or 4 during the rest of the year.
Oh,
And they
great.
were multi-page letters. And it was great. He like to get them every single time because he's also an artist and he would send these beautiful drawings and he had great penmanship and he would just tell me things about myself I wasn't hearing from anybody else. He would tell me I was beautiful. He would tell me I was brilliant. He would tell me I was his favorite person. you know? And it was just this level of kindness and love that I both really, really, really wanted from him. And also it get really, really, I think, angry in a way I couldn't describe yet because he wasn't there
Yeah.
to express that in real time with me.
Describe the conversation you had with your dad in finding out about what he did.
Mm.
And then how did that relate to your own experiences?
My dad isn't the one who told me what he did. What, you know, my grandmother decided to tell me what he did over um, Panda Express at the in the food court of the mall in my hometown. Um, she told me why my dad was in prison. I was 13. And I had a similar thing with my mom, or with my grandma that I had with my mom. With my mom, you weren't allowed to react emotionally because you probably get like hit or screamed at or something. With my grandma, you weren't allowed to react emotionally because then she would, for the rest of your life, be like, I can't tell you anything because remember that time you cried at the mall. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so. I tried to like really hold myself together after finding this out, because about I want to say about 6 months prior to my grandma telling me about this, I had been raped by a young man who I'd gone to school with. And my worst fear was that my dad was in prison for rape
Yeah.
because it felt like just the cruelest, worst thing you could do to a person. And I know that there are terrible things you can do to people that are not, rape. But I just like, there are all these, like, you watch enough television and read enough books, and you're like, hey, sometimes people have been labeled murderers, and then you go look at the details, and it's like, meh. Like, in that situation, I don't know what I would have done either. There is never a situation where somebody gets raped where it's like, well, that was a tough call to do or not do. You know, it's not stealing because you're hungry. You know what I mean? It's not like there are so many things that it's like you do that and it might be for this. Rape isn't one of them. And so it's just, it devastated me. It devastated me for myself. It devastated me for my mother. It devastated me for my family. It devastated me for his victims. My God, for the rest of my life, will always like have this weird feeling about being one of so many who have had their bodies violated that way. And to know that there are at least two people out there who only know that feeling because of the person who made up half of my DNA. Like it's terrible. It's an
Yeah.
awful realization.
And so where are you guys at now in your relationship?
It's strange, because it's really easy. It's actually like he's so easy to talk to, which is strange for me to say. I don't find many people easy to talk to, but he's so easy to talk to. And
That's nice.
it's a lot of it's a lot of the same experiences I had as a kid, but on a greater scale, in that there's that bittersweetness all the time of realizing he and I have been talking for half an hour and how much I've laughed and how much I've enjoyed it and how easy it is to talk with him and feeling like the sweetness of that. And then comes that little voice in the back that's like, yeah, it only took 38 years, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It only took your whole life.
And does he know about you growing up with your mom and the abuse?
Yes, um, yes, and that's a tricky point for us.
Yeah. Say
Um,
more.
he For him, he has so much gratitude for my mom taking care of us with no help while he was incarcerated. He has so much reverence and like really cultivated that the entire time he was in prison and before he knew any of the details or what like it had been like growing up in that home. So sometimes it's hard because like I want to be respectful of his perspective on that, but I also am pretty deeply immediately triggered by his defense of her, and he's quick to defend her, for those reasons. And so the stuff that happened when I was a kid really ends up being a place that like I don't touch a whole lot with my
Yeah.
dad because the only thing there is anger. And I feel safe to express that with my dad, probably mostly because, our relationship developed in my adulthood and not my childhood.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of times I don't want to. I don't want to take away from him one of the things that really got him through that time. And I don't want to put him in a position where he's having to sort of like fix and parent me like a child.
I can appreciate that. And I can also really appreciate his reverence towards your mom. And there
Hmm.
also might be a piece of him that if he holds both, the reverence and his own sadness, anger towards her being a single parent and abusing you, that may be too much for him to bear. It
And
may be
it's
it may be too much for him.
right. And it's not my job to save him from that, but I'm also
Right.
not interested in inducing it.
Right.
If we come to a point where that conversation has to be as cut and dry as like, do not ever defend her to me, do not ever, like, if it comes to that, like, it comes to that. And I would hate
Yeah.
to see that day, but it
Yeah.
hasn't come to that. Right now, we both try to be really respectful of each other's perspectives and also hear each other. I don't doubt that my father at any given moment is trying to hear me and really trying to see where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's enough. I don't need a whole lot more than like your honest effort. And that's always been true.
Thanks for sharing that. So describe where you are right now with your mom.
One of the things I think a lot of people expected after the book came out was that my mom was going to read it and there was going to be some big reconciliation, or like a coming together or an evolving of the relationship. And I always felt bad when people would express that because I never expected it, like ever, ever in a million years. So when it didn't happen, I was like, yeah, you know, par for the course. I'm used to this. But I have found that a lot of people around me, especially like readers who were not familiar with who were not familiar with me or my writing or my work or like my personality online or anything before the book came out, those people hold out a lot of hope, and it makes me sad. It makes me really, really sad because it's always evidence that either they are in a similar situation with a parent where they are still holding out hope, or they have such a different relationship with their parent that they are having a really hard time reconciling the fact that anybody's parent could behave this way or might just like sort of disappear or not want to be involved. And it's tough because it's like I'm just talking about my real life and my real experiences, things I'm going through, things I've gone through. And I'm finding that it can be highly, highly triggering for people who have not experienced those things and do not think of them as things that happen to people. And the mom stuff, Oh my gosh, people cannot the stories I could tell you about people crashing out about my mom because they cannot imagine that my mom is not their mom. Like it's tough to watch because it's like watching I'm having to watch other people go through something based on my revelation that like this is what my life is like and what it's been like. My mom doesn't reach out. She's not interested. She doesn't hate me, I don't think, or and I don't even think she's actively angry with me about anything right now, but she's not interested.
Has your mom read the book?
No, she won't. She
Yeah.
never will.
Yeah.
She will never read it. And I told people that before it came out, and they did not believe me. And then the book started to get a lot of, media attention, and it was very successful. And then it became like, well, she has to read the book now. And I feel like I'm watching people go through a process that I went through 10 years before that moment,
Of
right?
course.
Where it's like, I know in your mind, you'll think this is the one. She's gonna get it together now. She's not, babe. She's not going to. She's not going to show up. She's not going to do it. I gave a talk in Fort Wayne, my hometown, a few years ago, and I tell this story all the time to try to get across to people like the mom conversation and like the defensiveness that people have about the concept of mothers, like not the individual moms but just the concept of what a mom is and what a mom is capable of. um but I was sitting on stage having a conversation. Somebody asked about how my mom reacts when she's in rooms like the one we're in right now, when she comes to see me at things, when she comes to events. And I told them she hasn't been to any. She's not going to come to any of them. And it's almost like the quizzical dog meme, like, what? And it's like, guys, she's not coming. She's not going to show up. And this is a thing that I will have to do for the rest of my life is convince people that that the mother I have is the mother I have. I'll have to do that for the rest of my life. When I reach out to somebody and I say, "Can you help me with wedding planning?" And they say, "I'd love to. I'd like this is such a dream come true, but I don't want to step on your mom's toes. Can you ask your mom how involved she wants to be?" And I'm like, "No, I don't have to ask her because I know that she doesn't want to be involved." And they're like, "Please, it would make me feel better because I don't want to feel like I'm stepping on her toes. Her daughter is getting married, her first child to get married. There's no way she doesn't want to be involved. Now I have to do my due diligence and call my
Yeah.
mom and ask her how involved she wants to be. And when she says, planning isn't really my thing, and that's the end of the conversation, now I have to think about how I'm going to convey that to that person in a way that they will believe, because they're not going to believe that when I called my mother and said, "How involved do you want to be in like the planning of my wedding?" that her only response is, "Planning isn't really my thing."
Yeah.
Which doesn't even make me upset. It's totally
Right.
expected. But
Yeah.
now I'm going to have to deal with that person's upset. And when I was
Wow.
in that room and I told those people that she didn't come into these rooms, I had a man come up to me at the end of the signing line. And this was a long signing line that day. Okay. I sold a lot of books, whatever I said in that room. And this man waited until the end of the signing line to come up and tell me that for the rest of the time I was speaking, he could not stop turning around and looking toward the entrance of the room, expecting my mom to walk in and surprise me. He could
He
not stop looking.
Wow, thank you for sharing. It's so great to have had you on this show, and I am so glad that you have spoken your truth and that you have broken that family cycle for your family of speaking the truth.
Thank you.
And I'm I look forward to all the lives that you'll touch through your story, through your book, through your speaking engagements, however you get out to the masses. It's been really lovely to interview you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for letting me share.
How can people find you?
People can find me very easily on Instagram. My name is Smash Fizzle on there, SMASHFIZZLE. Or I have a website, ashleycford.com or ashleycford.net, and easy to see what I'm up to, what I've been up to, what I've got going on when I'm around.
That's great. And what does the C stand for?
Cassandra.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah. Or terrible, depending on how well you know the Greek tragedy.
Yes. Ashley C. Ford's book is called Somebody's Daughter. It's really an incredible read, full of wonderful stories about her experiences and what she went through, and I highly recommend it. In This Family is presented by Nexus Family Healing, a national nonprofit mental health organization. You can learn more about Nexus and how to support our mission at nexusfamilyhealing.org. The show is produced by John Moe with music from Jeremy Messersmith. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe, rate, and write a review. I'm Dr. Michelle K. Murray. See you next time.